The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and living metal. Light from a dozen artificial suns filled the space with a golden glow that never faded. Representatives from 400 species sat in their designated sections, each one shaped to fit their particular biology. Some breathed oxygen. Some breathed methane. Some did not breathe at all. Ambassador Linda Marsh stood alone at the central platform, a single human woman facing the collected power of a galaxy. She was 53 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many insults to count. Behind her, the small human delegation waited in silence. They had been waiting for 300 years. The Valari delegate spoke first, as he always did. His body was made of living crystal that shifted colors with his emotions. Right now, he glowed a deep purple that meant contempt. His name was Counselor Thren, and he had spent the last century making sure humanity knew its place. The Council has reviewed the human request for expanded territory rights, Thren announced, his voice echoing through translation devices in 100 languages. The request is denied. Humans will remain within their current boundaries. Any attempt to expand will be met with sanctions. Linda did not react. She had expected this. They always said no. The Kreth representative clicked her mandibles in agreement. She was an insectoid creature the size of a small car, 6 arms and compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. The humans are too young, she said. Too aggressive. They must learn patience before they can be trusted with more space. More agreement rippled through the chamber. The Torvani elder, ancient beyond measure, with his 6 eyes and scaled skin, simply nodded. The Morthani collective, a hive mind that spoke through 1,000 small bodies, hummed their approval. 300 years of this. 300 years of being told to wait, to learn, to be patient. 300 years of watching other species receive the rights that humans were denied. 300 years of insults dressed up as guidance. Linda looked down at the data pad in her hand. The message from Earth had arrived that morning. Every human government, every colony, every station had voted. The result was unanimous. She took a deep breath. The United Human Confederacy thanks the Council for its consideration, Linda said, her voice calm and steady. However, we will not be requesting anything from this body again. The chamber fell silent. Even the Morthani stopped humming. The United Human Confederacy formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. Linda continued. Effective immediately. All treaties, agreements, and obligations are hereby terminated. Humanity will no longer participate in council affairs. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Counselor Thren began to laugh. His crystal body flickered with bright pink amusement. Withdraw? And go where, little human? You have no friends outside this chamber. You have no trade partners, except those we allow. Your technology depends on council resources. You will starve within a year. Other delegates joined the laughter. The Kreth representative's mandibles clicked in what passed for humor among her species. Even the serious Torvani elders seemed amused. Linda waited for the laughter to fade. Then she smiled. There was something in that smile that made Counselor Thren stop laughing. Something cold and patient and absolutely certain. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, a terrible secret that would change everything. We will not return, Linda said softly. And in time, Counselor, you will understand why that should terrify you. She turned and walked toward the exit. The human delegation followed in perfect silence. Their footsteps echoed through the suddenly quiet chamber. Wait, the Kreth representative called out. You cannot simply leave. There are procedures. Forms to fill. Debts to settle. Linda did not stop walking. Send the forms to an empty office. We will not be there to receive them. This is madness, Counselor Thren shouted, his crystal body now burning red with anger. You need us. You have always needed us. Without the Council, humanity is nothing. Linda paused at the great doors of the chamber. She turned one last time to face the assembled powers of the galaxy. You taught us many things in 300 years, she said. You taught us that the galaxy is cruel. You taught us that the strong prey on the weak. You taught us that kindness is weakness and mercy is foolishness. She shook her head slowly. You were wrong about all of it. And one day, you will see just how wrong you were. The doors closed behind her. Admiral Patrick Cole watched the broadcast from the bridge of the carrier Endeavour. Around him, officers worked in focused silence, preparing for the signal they had been waiting for. The Endeavour was positioned at the very edge of Council space, hidden behind a dead moon in a system nobody cared about. But the Endeavour was not alone. Stretching out in every direction, invisible to Council sensors, waited the largest fleet humanity had ever built. Orders received. Admiral Lieutenant Nina Vance reported from her communication station. She was young, only 2 unisex, but her eyes held the same tired determination that Patrick had seen in every human who dealt with the Council. Project Exodus is authorized. Full withdrawal begins now. Patrick nodded slowly. He had served in the human fleet for 40 years. He had watched friends die in conflicts the Council could have prevented. He had seen human colonies denied medicine that other species received freely. He had learned to smile at insults and bow to creatures who considered him barely better than an animal. No more. Signal all ships, Patrick ordered. Begin withdrawal. Every human vessel, every station, every colony. We leave nothing behind except empty buildings and silence. Nina sent the signal. Across Council space, the evacuation began. On 100 worlds, humans packed their belongings and boarded waiting ships. In 1,000 stations, engineers shut down reactors and sealed airlocks. In 10,000 ships, crews plotted courses for home. It happened so fast that the Council barely noticed. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already over. Within 48 hours, every trace of human presence had vanished from Council space. Mines that had operated for centuries sat empty. Research stations floated silent and dark. Trade routes that had carried human goods for generations were suddenly completely abandoned. The Council celebrated for exactly 1 week. Speeches were given about the foolishness of humanity. Jokes were made about the primitive species that thought it could survive alone. Some delegates even suggested tracking down the humans and bringing them back by force, just to teach them a lesson. Then the reports started coming in. Border systems went dark. Ships sent to investigate did not return. Strange readings appeared on long-range sensors, readings that the oldest Council members recognized with growing horror. Something was coming. Something ancient and terrible and hungry in humanity. The species that everyone had dismissed as children was gone, in the darkness between galaxies. Admiral Patrick Cole received the first intelligence reports about what was approaching Council space. He read them in silence, his face growing pale. Sir? Nina asked quietly. What do we do? Patrick set down the report. He looked out at the stars, at the vast empty space that humanity now called home. We prepare, he said softly. Because when this is over, they are going to need us. And we need to decide what kind of species we want to be. The universe held its breath, waiting for what came next. 5 years passed in the darkness between stars. 5 years of silence from the humans who had walked away from everything they knew. 5 years that changed the galaxy forever. Counselor Thren stood before an emergency assembly, his crystal body no longer shining with confidence. The purple glow of contempt had faded long ago. Now he flickered with pale blue fear that he could not hide. We have lost contact with 17 border systems, Thren announced to the silent chamber. Patrol ships sent to investigate have not returned. Colony worlds that reported distress signals 3 days ago are now completely silent. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had spent millennia in cold peace began shouting accusations at each other. The Kreth representative pointed her 6 arms at the Torvani delegation. Your fleets were seen near those systems. What have you done? The Torvani elder rose to his full height, all 6 eyes blazing with anger. We have done nothing. Perhaps your hive ships are responsible for this destruction. The Morthani collective buzzed with fury, their 1,000 small bodies swarming in agitation. You blame us? Your species has wanted war for centuries. On and on it went. Every species accusing every other species, old hatreds boiling to the surface. Nobody wanted to admit the truth. Nobody wanted to face what was really happening. Deep in the Council archives, an ancient scholar named Velik pulled up records that had not been accessed in 10,000 years. His species, the Torvani, were the oldest members of the Council. They remembered things that younger species had forgotten. Velik stared at his screen with growing horror. The readings from the border systems matched exactly with records from before the Council existed. Before the great civilizations rose, before everything, the Void Swarm had returned Commander Kira Lawson, guided her reconnaissance vessel through space that no Council ship had ever explored. The ship was called the Starlight, though it carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Humanity had spent 5 years building vessels like this, preparing for something they hoped would never come. Kira was 34 years old, with dark skin and eyes that had learned to see patterns where others saw only chaos. She had been born on a Council world, raised hearing insults about her species every day. When humanity left, she had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment available. Now she floated at the edge of known space, watching her sensors with growing dread. "Commander Ensign," Timothy Blake said from the pilot seat. He was barely 20, too young to remember the worst of the Council years. "I am getting readings that do not match anything in our database." Kira moved to his station and looked at the display. What she saw made her stomach drop. Ships. Millions of ships. Perhaps billions. Moving through the darkness between galaxies like a tide of absolute night. They gave off no heat, no radiation, no sign of life. They simply existed, vast and silent and hungry. "Get me a line to Earth Command," Kira ordered, her voice steady despite her fear. "Priority Alpha. Encryption level maximum." Timothy worked his console with shaking hands. "Connection established, Commander." Kira took a deep breath. "Earth Command. This is Commander Kira Lawson of the reconnaissance vessel Starlight. I am transmitting sensor data now. The Void Swarm is real. Repeat, the Void Swarm is real. They are approaching Council space with a fleet larger than anything we have ever seen. Estimated time to first contact is approximately 3 months." She paused, looking at the endless darkness filling her screen. "The Council is about to learn why they needed us." Starlight out. On Earth, President Daniel Ortega read the report in his private office. Outside his window, the city of New Geneva gleamed in the afternoon sun. Children played in parks filled with flowers that bloomed year-round. Ships rose toward orbit, carrying colonists to new worlds that humanity had discovered in their 5 years of freedom. Daniel was 61 years old, a former soldier who had seen the worst that the galaxy could offer. He had lost friends to Council negligence. He had watched human colonies suffer while other species prospered. He had sworn that humanity would never be treated that way again. Now, he faced a choice that would define his species forever. The door opened and General Catherine Brooks entered. She was tall and strong, with gray hair cut short and scars on her hands from battles fought long ago. Behind her came the rest of the Joint Chiefs, the military leaders of the United Human Confederacy. "You have read the report," Daniel said. It was not a question. Catherine nodded. "The Void Swarm. Ancient records suggest they destroyed dozens of civilizations before the Council even existed. They were driven back beyond the galactic rim and assumed extinct." They were not extinct, sir. They were waiting. Daniel set down the report and walked to the window. Below him, a family was having a picnic in the park. 2 children, a boy and a girl, were throwing a ball back and forth while their parents watched and laughed. "The Council will fall," Catherine said quietly. "Their fleets are designed to fight each other, not a threat like this. They have no unified command structure. They will argue and blame each other while their worlds burn." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "They will. It's 300 years they treated us like dirt. They mocked us. They restricted us. They called us primitive and stupid and dangerous." Catherine's voice was hard with old anger. Now they face extinction, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. Daniel watched the children playing below. The girl caught the ball and laughed with pure joy. Her whole life was ahead of her, full of possibility and hope. What kind of people do we want to be? Daniel asked softly. Catherine frowned. Sir? When historians write about this moment, what do we want them to say? That humanity watched the galaxy burn because we were angry about how we were treated? That we let billions die because our pride was hurt? He turned to face his generals. Or do we want them to say that when the darkness came, humanity stood in the light? That we saved those who would have let us die? That we showed the galaxy what mercy really means? The room was silent. Catherine looked at the other generals, then back at Daniel. They do not deserve our help, she said finally.
Oh, Daniel agreed.
They do not. But we are not doing this for them. We are doing this for us. For the children who will inherit the galaxy after we are gone. For the future we want to build. He straightened his shoulders. Prepare the fleet. All of it. Everything we have built in 5 years of freedom. We are going back to council space. Catherine stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. The council is going to be very surprised. Yes, Daniel said, looking out at the peaceful city below. They certainly are. Across human space, the word went out. Ships that had been hiding in secret shipyards powered up their engines. Soldiers who had been training for this moment checked their weapons one final time. Scientists who had spent 5 years developing impossible technologies uploaded their last updates. Humanity was going to war. Not for revenge. Not for power. Not for territory. They were going to war because someone had to stand against the darkness. And if not them, then who? The Council Defense Fleet died in the first 3 days. 2,000 ships. The combined military power of 400 species. Faced the void swarm above the colony world of Thraxis Prime? They fought bravely. They fought with everything they had. They did not even slow the enemy down. Admiral Varric of the Torvani watched from his command, ship as vessel after vessel vanished into the darkness. His sensors could barely track the void ships. They absorbed light, absorbed energy, absorbed everything. When they touched a council ship, that ship simply ceased to exist. All units retreat, Varric ordered, his 6 eyes wide with horror. Fall back to the secondary defense line. Oh. There was no response. There was no one left to respond. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. The Kreth homeworld fell in 6 hours. The Valari Crystal City's beautiful structures that had stood for 100,000 years were consumed in a single night. The Morthoni Collective lost contact with half their hive minds before they even understood what was happening. Counselor Thren broadcast a desperate plea from the council. Capital World. His crystal body had turned completely white with terror, a color his species only showed when facing death. To any who can hear this message, the Galactic Council begs for assistance. Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are burning. Our people are dying by the billions. If there is any mercy left in the universe, any power that can help us, please, we beg you, save us. He did not expect an answer. The council had no allies. They had spent millennia making sure of that. The response came from a direction no one expected. Galactic Council, this is Admiral Patrick Cole of the United Human Confederacy Navy. We received your transmission. Do not lose hope. Reinforcements are on the way.
Ow.
Thren stared at his communication screen in disbelief. The humans. You cannot be serious. You left us. You abandoned the council. We did, Patrick's voice replied calmly. And now we are coming back. Hold your positions. Help arrives in 4 hours. The transmission ended. Thren looked at the other council members who had gathered in the emergency bunker beneath the capital city. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. 4 hours later, the sky above the council homeworld lit up with 10,000 new stars. The human fleet emerged from fold space in perfect formation. Ships of every size stretched from horizon to horizon. It's a wall of metal and fire that made the council's greatest vessels look like toys. At the center of the formation floated the carrier Endeavor, now 3 times its original size. Bristling with weapons that the council had never seen, Admiral Patrick Cole stood on his bridge, watching the void swarm approach. Around him, His crew worked in focused silence. They had trained for this moment for 5 years. They had built weapons specifically designed to fight this enemy. They were ready. "Signal the fleet," Patrick ordered. "All ships advance. Weapons free." The human fleet moved forward like a single organism. Fighter squadrons launched from carrier bays, thousands of small craft that moved faster than Council sensors could track. Battleships powered up weapons that burned with the light of captured stars. Destroyer groups formed attack patterns that the Void Swarm had never encountered. Commander Kira Lawson led the first assault wing in her upgraded vessel. The Starlight had been rebuilt from the ground up, equipped with weapons and shields that would have seemed like magic 5 years ago. "All wings, this is Commander Lawson. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. These things killed billions of innocent people. They destroyed civilizations that existed before the Council was born. Today, we make them pay." She pushed her throttle forward. Behind her, 200 human fighters followed. The first wave of void ships moved to intercept. They were vast, dark shapes that seemed to swallow the light around them. They had destroyed everything the Council sent against them without effort. Kira fired. Light erupted from her weapons. Pure white energy that punched through the void ship's darkness like a knife through paper. The enemy vessel shuddered, flickered, and exploded into fragments that dissolved into nothing. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human weapons, designed specifically to counter void technology, tore through enemy ships by the hundreds. Human pilots trained in K-Tics that prioritize speed and precision danced through enemy formations without a scratch. The Void Swarm hesitated. For the first time in their ancient existence, they faced something they could not simply consume. On the Council homeworld, Thren watched the battle with tears streaming down his crystal face. He had spent a century mocking humans. He had called them primitives. He had laughed when they left the Council. He had been so certain they would fail. Now those same humans were dying to protect his world. Lieutenant Nina Vance tracked the battle from her station on the Endeavor, feeding targeting data to every ship in the fleet. She had not slept in 36 hours. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook. But she did not stop working. "Admiral," she reported, "enemy fleet is beginning to reorganize. They are adapting to our tactics." Patrick nodded. He had expected this. The Void Swarm had survived for millions of years by learning from their enemies. They would not be defeated easily. "Signal all capital ships," he ordered. "Initiate Protocol Omega." Deep in the heart of the Endeavor, engineers activated systems that humanity had hoped never to use. Reality itself seemed to bend as the ship's central weapon powered up. It was called the Soulfire Cannon, a name that the scientists who built it thought was overdramatic, until they saw what it could do. The weapon fired, a beam of pure white light, brighter than 1,000 suns, lanced across space and struck the heart of the Void Swarm fleet. Everything it touched simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, erased from the universe as if it had never been. The Void Swarm screamed, not with sound, but with something deeper. A psychic howl of pain and rage that every mind in the system felt. Creatures that had never known fear suddenly understood what it meant to face something more powerful than themselves. They fled. The battle had raged for 72 hours. Humanity lost ships. They lost soldiers. They lost friends who would never come home. But they did not retreat. They did not break. They stood in the darkness and fought until the darkness ran away. Nina stared at her screen, watching the Void Swarm signatures disappear into the distant void. Tears streamed down her face. "Admiral, they are retreating. All enemy units are withdrawing from Council space." Patrick Cole slumped in his command chair. He was exhausted beyond words. Around him, officers were weeping, embracing, simply staring in shock at what they had done. "Signal all ships," Patrick said quietly. "Stand down from combat stations. Medical teams begin rescue operations for any survivors. And someone please get me a cup of coffee." Weak laughter rippled through the bridge. The tension that had held them all for 3 days finally broke. They had won. Against an enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations, against odds that should have been impossible, they had won. On the Council homeworld, Counselor Thren fell to his knees and wept. Around him, survivors of 100 species did the same. The humans had saved them all. The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked different now. Half the seats were empty. The species that once filled them no longer existed, consumed by the void swarm before humanity arrived. The survivors sat in silence, waiting for judgment from the people they had wronged for 3 centuries. Counselor Thren walked slowly to the central platform where Ambassador Linda Marsh stood. His crystal body was dim, cracked in places from the stress of recent events. He moved like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear. "Do not have words for what you have done," Thren said quietly. His voice, once so full of contempt, now trembled with emotion. "We treated your species like animals. We mocked your technology. We laughed at your culture. We denied you rights that we gave freely to species who had done nothing to earn them." He lowered his head, a gesture that his species had not performed in 10,000 years. "And when the darkness came, when everything we built was about to be destroyed, you saved us anyway. I do not understand why." Linda Marsh studied the alien before her. She was older now, her hair completely gray and her face lined with years of stress. She had dedicated her life to winning humanity, a place in the galaxy. She had watched her species walk away from everything they had built. She had waited 5 years to return. "Do you remember what I said when we left?" she asked softly. Thren nodded slowly. "You said we would understand why your departure should terrify us. I meant something different than you thought. I was not threatening you with weapons or war. I was trying to tell you something important about who we are." She paused, looking around the damaged chamber at the broken species who had gathered to hear her words. "Humanity is young. In the scale of galactic civilization, we are barely more than children. But we learned something that older species seem to have forgotten. We learned that strength without mercy is just cruelty. We learned that power without compassion is just tyranny. We learned that the true measure of a civilization is not what it takes, but what it gives." She turned back to Thren. "We did not save you because you deserved it. We saved you because it was the right thing to do. Because when we looked into the void, we saw billions of lives worth protecting. Not Valari lives or Kreth lives or Torvani lives, just lives. Mothers and fathers and children who deserved a chance to see another sunrise." The Kreth representative stepped forward. Her compound eyes were dim with grief. She had lost 2/3 of her species to the void swarm. "Then what do you want from us?" "Whatever price you name, we will pay it. Whatever debt you claim, we will honor it." Linda shook her head. "We do not want payment. We do not want power. We do not want revenge for how you treated us." "Then what?" Thren asked desperately. "What can we possibly give you?" Linda smiled, the same smile she had worn 5 years ago when everything changed. "We want you to become better. Not for us. For yourselves. For the galaxy. For every species that will join the Council in the centuries to come." She raised her hand toward the empty seats around the chamber. "Look at what you lost. Look at the civilizations that will never exist again because the Council spent millennia fighting itself instead of preparing for real threats. Look at the potential that was wasted because you were too busy competing to cooperate." Her voice grew stronger, filling the chamber with conviction. "We want you to change. We want you to look at every new species and see not what they are, but what they could become. We want you to give them the chance you never gave us." The chamber was silent. Representatives of 100 species listened to words that challenged everything they had believed about power and civilization. "We want you to build something new," Linda continued. "Not a council based on fear and hierarchy. A partnership based on hope and mutual respect. A galaxy where the strong lift up the weak instead of crushing them. A future where every being matters." She looked at each face in turn, alien and human alike. "That is the price of our help. That is what we ask in return for our blood and our sacrifice. Become the civilization we always believed you could be." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Counselor Thren bowed deeply, his crystal body touching the floor of the chamber. "Then let us begin again," he said softly, "and let us do it right this time." One by one. The other council members bowed as well, in the months that followed. The galaxy transformed in ways that no one had predicted. Human technology flowed freely to every species that needed it. Not sold, not traded, given without conditions. Medical advances that had taken humanity centuries to develop were shared in weeks. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions were taught to worlds that had known famine for generations. Energy systems that seemed like magic to younger species were explained in patient detail, and throughout it all, humanity asked for nothing in return. Admiral Patrick Cole retired to a small house overlooking the ocean on a colony world called New Pacifica. He spent his days fishing, reading, and watching the waves crash against the rocks below his porch. Sometimes old friends visited. Other veterans of the Void War who needed a quiet place to heal. Commander Kira Lawson took his place as Admiral of the Combined Fleet, a force that now included ships from every species in the galaxy. She trained her crews to fight together, to trust each other, to see past the differences that had divided them for so long. President Daniel Ortega served 2 more terms before stepping down. His last act in office was dedicating a memorial to everyone who had died in the Void War, human and alien alike. The monument stood on the Council homeworld, a tower of white stone that reached toward the stars. On the base of the monument, words were carved in every language known to the galaxy. They said simply, "They stood against the darkness so that others might see the light." Counselor Thren visited the memorial often. He would stand before it for hours, studying the names of humans who had died protecting his species. Sometimes he brought young Valari with him, children who had never known a universe without human allies. "Remember this," he would tell them, pointing at the endless list of names. "Remember what they did for us. Remember what it cost them. And spend your lives making sure we deserve their sacrifice." The children would nod solemnly, not fully understanding but sensing the weight of his words. Change came slowly at first, then faster as each success built on the last. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together. Worlds that had been battlegrounds became trading partners. Conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve were settled with words instead of weapons. Humanity did not lead this transformation. They did not want to. They simply showed what was possible and let others find their own way. "We are not here to rule the galaxy," Linda Marsh said in her final address before retiring. "We are here to prove that a better galaxy is possible. What you do with that proof is up to you." She walked away from public life and never looked back. But the example she and others had set would echo through the centuries that followed, shaping a future that none of them would live to see. The galaxy had a new protector now. And for the first time in recorded history, that protector wanted nothing but peace. 100 years had passed since the Void War. 100 years since humanity returned to save a galaxy that had treated them as lesser beings. 100 years that changed everything. The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked nothing like it once had. The old hierarchy was gone, replaced by a circular arrangement where every species sat as equals. Valari crystalline forms glittered beside Crethan sectoids. Torvani elders shared tables with Morthani representatives. And everywhere, scattered throughout the chamber, humans sat among their friends. Ambassador Samuel Grant walked toward the central platform. He was 32 years old, the great-grandson of refugees who had fled council persecution in the old days. His grandmother had told him stories about the insults and restrictions that humans once endured. His father had served in the Void War alongside Admiral Kira Lawson. Now Samuel stood where Linda Marsh had once stood, ready to address a very different galaxy. Behind him, a holographic display flickered to life, showing images of the past century. Cities rising from ruins. Species that had been enemies shaking hands for the first time. Ships from 100 worlds flying together in perfect formation. Children of different species playing games that none of their grandparents would have recognized. 100 years ago, Samuel began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, my ancestors made a choice. They walked away from this council after 3 centuries of mistreatment. They were tired of being dismissed as primitives, tired of being mocked as children, tired of being denied the basic respect that every thinking being deserves. He paused, looking at the assembled representatives. So many different shapes and colors and ways of being, so many beings who had learned to see each other as partners instead of enemies. They could have stayed away forever. When the Void Swarm came, when this galaxy faced extinction, they could have watched from the safety of their new home and done nothing. No one would have blamed them. No one would have known. The chamber was completely silent. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception focused on the young human ambassador. But they came back. Not for revenge. Not for power. Not for glory. They came back because they believed in something greater than old grudges. They believed that every being, no matter how flawed, deserved a chance to grow. They believed that the universe did not have to be cruel. Samuel gestured at the holographic display, which now showed images of the memorial tower on the council homeworld. Names scrolled across the screen. Thousands of them. Humans who had died fighting the Void Swarm. These are the people who saved us. Engineers and pilots and soldiers who gave their lives protecting species that had treated them as inferior. Doctors who worked themselves to exhaustion healing wounds in beings they had never met. Scientists who shared secrets that could have given humanity power over the entire galaxy. His voice grew stronger, filled with the conviction of someone who truly believed what he was saying. He did not ask what they would receive in return. They did not calculate the benefit to themselves. They simply saw suffering and decided to end it. They saw darkness and chose to be the light. Samuel turned to face each section of the chamber in turn, meeting the eyes of beings from dozens of different species. That is the gift my ancestors gave you. Not technology, though they shared everything they had. Not protection, though they built a fleet that kept you safe for generations. Not even peace, though they helped create the longest era of cooperation this galaxy has ever known. He smiled. The same smile that seemed to run in human blood. The same smile that Linda Marsh had worn a century ago. They gave you hope. They showed you that the strong do not have to prey on the weak. That power does not have to corrupt. That mercy is not weakness but strength. That together, beings who once saw each other as enemies can build something beautiful. The holographic display changed again, showing the galaxy as it existed now. Trade routes connecting every inhabited system. Research stations where scientists of 100 species worked side by side. Colonies where children grew up, never knowing the hatred that had once divided their grandparents. This is what we built together, Samuel said. Not humans alone. Not the council alone. All of us, working toward a future that none of our ancestors could have imagined. A galaxy where every voice matters. Where every being has value. Where hope is not foolish, but essential. He raised his hand toward the transparent dome above the chamber, toward the stars that glittered in the infinite darkness. Out there. Beyond the rim, there are species we have not yet met, challenges we have not yet faced, wonders we have not yet discovered, and we will meet them together as partners, as friends. As a galaxy united, Samuel stepped back from the podium, and the chamber erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very walls in her home on a distant world. 97-year-old Kira Lawson watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her weathered face. She sat in a comfortable chair beside a window that overlooked a garden filled with flowers from a dozen different planets. On the table beside her rested medals she had earned in the Void War, honors she rarely looked at anymore. She had been there at the beginning. She had piloted a tiny reconnaissance vessel through the darkness between galaxies, bringing back the warning that changed everything. She had led the first assault wing against enemies that had destroyed countless civilizations. She had trained a generation of officers to fight and to hope, and now she was seeing what it had all been for. "We did it," she whispered to the empty room. "We actually did it." Outside her window, the night sky blazed with the light of 10,000 worlds. Ships moved between the stars, carrying traders and diplomats and families on vacation to places their grandparents had never dreamed of. Somewhere out there, the memorial to the Void War dead stood eternal watch, reminding everyone who passed of the price that had been paid. Kira closed her eyes, remembering faces long gone. Admiral Patrick Cole, who had led the fleet that saved the galaxy. President Daniel Ortega, who had made the decision to help enemies instead of abandoning them. Ambassador Linda Marsh, who had walked out of the council chamber and started something no one could have predicted. They were all gone now. But what they had built remained. On the council homeworld, Counselor Thren's great-great-grandchild stood before the memorial tower with a group of young beings from a dozen different species. She was explaining the history, telling the story of how humanity had saved the galaxy and asked for nothing in return. "Remember this," she said, echoing words that had been passed down through generations. "Remember what they did for us. Remember what it cost them. And spend your lives making sure we deserve their sacrifice." The young beings nodded solemnly, just as Thren's original students had nodded a century ago. The lesson continued. The memory endured. The hope survived. Back in the council chamber, Samuel Grant finished his address and stepped down from the platform. Delegates from every species crowded around him, offering congratulations and thanks. Somewhere in the crowd, an old Valeri caught his eye and nodded slowly, a gesture of respect that his species had learned from humans long ago. Samuel nodded back, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. The day humanity left the Galactic Council was the day the universe began to change. Not through conquest or domination, but through an act of impossible mercy. Through the belief that even enemies could become friends. Through the stubborn human conviction that the darkness could always be pushed back if enough people stood together. The universe would never be the same again. And that was exactly what humanity had intended.